The distress signal came through the void like a dying whisper, barely strong enough to register on the communication arrays of passing ships. Most vessels in the sector had already received it, analyzed it, and moved on. The signal originated from a small, damaged craft drifting near the edge of the Kepler 442 system, far from any established trade routes or colonies. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the cargo hauler, Terra's Promise, studying the readout on her display. Her first officer, Marcus Rodriguez, shook his head as he reviewed the technical data. "It's a Zelhari vessel," Marcus said, his voice carrying the weight of certainty. "Life signs show one survivor, but barely. The ship's been dead in space for at least 6 days." Sarah frowned at the data. The Zelhari were known throughout the galaxy as one of the most arrogant and hostile species in the Galactic Coalition. Their crystalline appearance and advanced technology made them formidable, but their attitude toward other species was legendary in all the worst ways. They considered most other races to be inferior and treated them accordingly. "Any other ships responding to the signal?" Sarah asked. 3 Vorthon merchant vessels passed through yesterday. A Klaxon diplomatic cruiser went by this morning. There was also a Nexari science ship about 4 hours ago. Marcus paused, checking his logs. None of them stopped. Sarah wasn't surprised. The Vorthons had a long-standing trade dispute with the Zelhari that had cost them millions in lost contracts. The Klaxons had been publicly humiliated by Zelhari ambassadors at the last Galactic Council meeting, where they'd been called primitive cave dwellers in front of dozens of species representatives. As for the Nexari, their peaceful research vessels had been attacked by Zelhari warships just 2 months ago when they'd accidentally entered what the Zelhari claimed was their territory. "Captain?" came a voice from the communications station. Lieutenant Kim Park looked up from her console with a troubled expression. "I've been monitoring Coalition channels. There's been chatter about this distress call for hours. Several ships have acknowledged receiving it, but—" She trailed off. "But what, Lieutenant?" "But they're all choosing to ignore it. There are reports of at least 12 different vessels that have passed within rescue range and continued on their way." Sarah walked to the main view screen, where the distant speck of the damaged Zelhari ship was barely visible against the star field. She'd heard stories about the Zelhari's treatment of other species. They refused to trade with races they considered beneath them, which was practically everyone. They'd blockaded entire systems to prove political points. Their diplomats were notorious for their condescending attitudes and outright insults. Just last year, Sarah had witnessed a Zelhari commander order a human mining crew off an asteroid they'd been legally working for months, claiming humans were too primitive to properly extract the minerals. When the humans refused to leave, the Zelhari had used sonic weapons to drive them away, causing permanent hearing damage to several workers. "What's our cargo situation?" Sarah asked. "Medical supplies bound for the New Geneva colony," Marcus replied. "They're expecting us in 36 hours, but we have some buffer time built into the schedule." Sarah considered their options. The logical choice was clear. Continue to New Geneva and deliver their cargo on time. The Zelhari had made enemies of practically every species they'd encountered. This survivor had probably participated in or supported actions that had caused suffering to countless beings across the galaxy. By every reasonable measure, justice would be letting them face the consequences of their species' actions. "Captain," Kim said quietly, "I'm picking up more details from the ship's emergency beacon. The survivor is badly injured. Without medical attention, they'll be dead within 12 hours. "Good riddance," Marcus muttered under his breath, but loud enough for Sarah to hear. Sarah understood her first officer's sentiment. She'd lost friends to Zelhari aggression over the years. The species had a reputation for cruelty that was well earned through centuries of documented behavior. But as she stared at that tiny, dying ship, she felt something stirring in her chest that she couldn't quite name. Plot an intercept course, she said finally. The bridge fell silent. Marcus turned to stare at her. Captain, are you serious? After everything the Zelhari have done? I'm serious. Sarah's voice was steady, but she could feel the weight of her crew's confusion and disapproval. But Sarah, Marcus said, dropping formal protocol in his shock, they hate us. Remember the massacre at Proxima Station? Zelhari forces killed 300 human civilians because we contaminated their sacred space by building a research facility. Sarah remembered. She also remembered the dozen other atrocities, the countless insults, the systematic oppression of human colonies in disputed territories. The Zelhari had given the galaxy every reason to let them die alone in the void. I know, she said simply. Plot the course anyway. As the Terra's promise changed, heading toward the distressed vessel, Sarah felt the disapproving silence of her crew. They would follow her orders because they trusted her leadership, but she could sense their confusion and anger. She was asking them to risk their mission and potentially their lives for a member of a species that had shown nothing but contempt for humanity. 2 hours later, they were close enough for a visual on the Zelhari ship. It was a sleek, crystalline vessel that would have been beautiful if not for the massive breach in its hull. Debris floated around it in a slowly expanding cloud, and the ship's characteristic blue glow was flickering weakly. Life signs are getting weaker, Kim reported. The survivor is definitely dying. Prepare the medical bay, Sarah ordered, and ready a rescue pod. Captain, Marcus said, his voice strained with emotion. I have to ask, why? Why are we doing this? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching the damaged alien ship grow larger on their screen. Because, she said finally, someone has to. The rescue operation took 3 hours. The Zelhari ship's internal atmosphere was toxic to humans, requiring full environmental suits. The survivor was found unconscious in what appeared to be a medical bay, their crystalline body flickering with weak internal light. Dr. Amanda Foster, the Terra's Promise's chief medical officer, worked frantically to stabilize the alien as they transported them to their own medical bay. The Zelhari was young, barely past adolescence by their species' standards, and had suffered severe injuries from what looked like an explosion in the ship's engine room. Will they live? Sarah asked as she watched the medical team work. Maybe, Dr. Foster replied without looking up from her patient. But it's going to be close. Their physiology is completely different from anything I've treated before. As the medical bay doors closed behind the unconscious Zelhari, Sarah stood in the corridor and wondered if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her career. In 12 hours, they would know if their efforts had been worth it. In 12 hours, she might be facing the first member of the Zelhari species who owed their life to human compassion. The irony wasn't lost on her. Across the galaxy, other species had left this being to die. Only humans, the species the Zelhari considered most inferior, had stopped to help. Whether that would matter to their patient remained to be seen. The Zelhari survivor regained consciousness 18 hours later, their crystalline form pulsing with a weak blue light as they struggled to focus their multifaceted eyes. Dr. Bass Foster had worked through 2 sleep cycles to keep them alive, adapting human medical equipment to accommodate their silicon-based biology. Captain Sarah Chen entered the medical bay carefully, unsure what to expect. She'd read the files on Zelhari psychology and knew they could be volatile when confused or frightened. The being on the medical bed was small for their species, perhaps equivalent to a human teenager, with translucent blue-green skin that revealed the complex network of energy pathways beneath. Where? The Zelhari spoke in their native language, a series of harmonic tones that the universal translator struggled to interpret. Where am I? You're aboard a human vessel, Sarah said gently. You were rescued from your damaged ship. I'm Captain Sarah Chen. The Zelhari's eyes widened in what Sarah had learned was an expression of shock in their species. They tried to sit up but winced in pain, the light in their body flickering dangerously. Humans? The word came out like an accusation. You are... Humans saved me? Yes. We received your distress signal and came to help. For several minutes, the young Zelhari stared at Sarah in silence. Their internal light pulsed in irregular patterns that Dr. Foster's equipment registered as signs of severe confusion and distress. I do not understand, they said finally. Humans are... You are the inferior species. Why would you risk your lives for one of the superior beings? Sarah felt a flash of anger, but kept her expression neutral. Even while lying broken and helpless in their medical bay, this being still considered humans beneath them. It would have been easy to remind them exactly how superior they were while drifting helplessly in space, abandoned by every other species in the galaxy. Instead, Sarah asked, "What's your name?" "I am Kethvar of the Illuminated House of Veltar," the young Zelhari replied with as much dignity as they could manage, while hooked up to human medical equipment. "I am a third-tier research analyst aboard the vessel Crystalline Truth." "Well, Kethvar, you're safe now. Your ship suffered catastrophic damage, but you're going to recover fully." Kethvar's light patterns shifted to what the translator interpreted as confusion mixed with suspicion. "What do you want in return? What is the price for this rescue?" Sarah blinked in surprise. "Price? There's no price. We don't charge for saving lives. All species demand compensation for their services. What do you humans want? Technology? Trade agreements? Territory? We want you to get well and return safely to your people." The young Zelhari stared at her for so long that Sarah began to wonder if they'd fallen unconscious again. Finally, Kethvar spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. That is not logical. My people have done nothing but demonstrate your inferiority. We have taken your colonies, dismissed your achievements, treated your species as barely evolved primitives. Why would you show me kindness?" Sarah pulled up a chair beside the medical bed. "Can I ask you something, Kethvar? Do you personally believe humans are inferior?" "Of course," they replied immediately, though their light patterns suggested uncertainty. "It is established fact. Humans are emotional, illogical, and lack the crystalline perfection of thought that defines true intelligence. And yet here you are, alive because of human emotions and supposedly inferior human logic." Kethvar's internal light dimmed as they processed this contradiction. "I do not understand your species." Over the following days, as Kethvar recovered, they observed the human crew with growing confusion. Dr. Foster checked on them regularly, adjusting their treatment with patient care despite receiving nothing but suspicion and occasional insults in return. Lieutenant Park brought them entertainment programs and news from their home system, translated into their language. Even Marcus, who had been most opposed to the rescue, helped modify their quarters to accommodate their unique physiology. "Why do you all do this?" Kethvar asked Sarah during one of her visits. "Your first officer clearly despises my species. I can see it in his body language, yet he spent hours ensuring my comfort." Sarah considered her answer carefully. "Because it's the right thing to do. When someone needs help, you help them. It doesn't matter who they are or what they've done. But my people have caused suffering to your kind. We have killed humans, taken human territory, treated your species with contempt for centuries." "Yes, you have." "Then why?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Tell me about your research, Kethvar. What were you studying on your ship?" The young Zelhari's light patterns shifted to something that suggested pride. "Quantum resonance patterns in stellar formations. I was analyzing how different star types affect the gravitational wave signatures that..." They stopped suddenly, Why do you ask? Because you're brilliant. Even lying here, injured and vulnerable, I can see the intelligence in your eyes. You have knowledge and insights that could benefit the entire galaxy. Letting you die would have been a waste of potential that goes beyond species or politics. Kethvar was silent for a long time. But I am Zelhari. I am your enemy. Are you? Right now, in this moment, are you my enemy? The question seemed to shake the young alien to their core. Their light patterns flickered through what the translator identified as multiple conflicting emotions. I do not know how to answer that. Then maybe that's a start. As the Terra's promise continued toward New Geneva Colony, word of their rescue began to spread through subspace communications. The reaction was swift and overwhelmingly negative. Other species couldn't understand why humans had risked themselves for a Zelhari. Many saw it as a sign of weakness or stupidity. The Vorthon Merchant Guild sent a formal complaint, demanding to know why humans would aid the crystalline oppressors. A Klaxon diplomatic vessel even changed course to intercept them, with their captain demanding an explanation for this act of misguided charity. But perhaps most surprising was the reaction from Zelhari space itself. When Kethvar's rescue became known, the response from their government was not gratitude but confusion and suspicion. Official channels questioned what humans hoped to gain from the gesture, while others suggested it might be part of some elaborate intelligence operation. "My people do not trust your motives," Kethvar said after receiving a communication from their family. "They believe this rescue is part of a larger human scheme." Sarah felt a wave of frustration. "What could we possibly hope to gain? We didn't even know who you were when we picked up your distress signal." "That is what I told them. They did not believe me." "What do you believe?" Kethvar's light patterns shifted to deep blue, an expression of profound thought in their species. "I believe," they said slowly, "that I have spent my entire life being taught things about humans that may not be true." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent call from the bridge. Sarah hurried to respond, leaving Kethvar alone with their thoughts. As she entered the bridge, Marcus met her with a grim expression. "Captain, we have a problem. Long-range sensors are detecting multiple ships converging on our position. 3 of them are Zelhari warships." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Are they responding to our passenger?" "It looks that way." "And Sarah—" Marcus paused, his voice heavy with concern. "They're not coming to thank us." The Zelhari warships arrived like crystalline death, their hulls gleaming with the harsh light of weapon systems, charging to full power. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Terra's Promise, watching 3 of the galaxy's most advanced military vessels surround her humble cargo hauler. Each Zelhari ship was 10 times larger than her vessel and carried enough firepower to reduce them to atoms. "Incoming transmission," Lieutenant Kim Park announced, her voice tight with tension. On screen. The main display filled with the imposing figure of a Zelhari military commander, their crystalline features sharp and unforgiving. The light patterns beneath their translucent skin pulsed with authority and barely contained aggression. "Human vessel, you are harboring stolen Zelhari property. Surrender young Kethvar immediately, and we may allow you to depart with your lives." Sarah stepped forward, keeping her voice steady despite the overwhelming odds. "Commander, we rescued Kethvar from a damaged ship after receiving their distress signal. They are recovering from serious injuries and—" "Silence!" The Zelhari commander's light flared brilliant white. "You dare speak as equals to the superior beings? The young one belongs to us. Your interference in Zelhari affairs will not be tolerated." Behind Sarah, Marcus whispered urgently, "Captain, we should comply. They'll destroy us without a second thought." But Sarah found herself thinking about the young Zelhari in their medical bay, who had spent days questioning everything they'd been taught about human inferiority. She thought about the dozen ships that had passed by the distress signal, leaving Kethvar to die alone in space. She thought about what it meant to be human in a galaxy that often seemed to have forgotten the value of simple compassion. "No," she said clearly. The Zelhari commander's light patterns shifted to what the translator identified as shock mixed with rage. "What did you say?" "I said no. Kethvar is under our protection until they're fully recovered and choose to leave of their own free will." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of electronics and the distant sound of weapons charging on the Zelhari ships. Marcus looked like he was about to have a heart attack. "You would challenge the might of the Zelhari Empire for one insignificant being that you barely know?" "Yes." "Even knowing that we could destroy your primitive vessel without effort?" Sarah glanced around at her crew. Kim Park straightened at her station, hands moving to the communication controls. Dr. Foster had appeared in the doorway, her face pale but determined. Even Marcus, despite his fears, moved to the tactical station. "Yes," Sarah repeated, "because that's what humans do. We protect those who need protection, regardless of the cost." The Zelhari commander studied her for a long moment, their light patterns cycling through what appeared to be confusion and calculation. "This is illogical. Kethvar is nothing to you. They cannot benefit your species. They have no strategic value. Why sacrifice yourselves?" Before Sarah could answer, another voice cut through the transmission. "Because they're trying to teach us something we forgot long ago." Kethvar appeared on the bridge, still weak but moving under their own power. Dr. Foster started forward to help them, but the young Zelhari waved her off gently. "Commander Velthara," Kethvar said, addressing the Zelhari officer with formal respect, "I request permission to speak." "You are barely past larvae stage, young one. Return to the human's custody and await transport." "No." The word came out stronger than anyone expected. "I invoke the right of witness truth." The commander's light patterns flickered with surprise. The right of witnessed truth was an ancient Zelhari tradition that allowed any citizen to speak before their superiors without interruption, but it was rarely used and carried serious consequences if the speaker was deemed to be wasting time. "You invoke sacred law for humans? I invoke sacred law for truth." Kethvar moved slowly to stand beside Sarah, their weakened forms still glowing with determination. "Commander, I have lived among these humans for days. I have watched them, studied them, tried to understand their motivations. What I discovered challenges everything we believe about inferior species. Speak quickly, young one. My patience wears thin." Kethvar's light patterns shifted to the formal configurations used for important testimony. "These humans received my distress signal after 12 other vessels had detected it and moved on. Vorthans, Klaxons, Nexari, even our own survey ship Deep Resonance passed by and left me to die. Only the humans stopped, because they are foolish and weak. No, Commander, because they are strong in ways we do not understand." Kethvar's voice grew stronger as they spoke. "When I regained consciousness, I expected to be held for ransom, or used as leverage against our people. Instead, their doctor worked for days to save my life, asking nothing in return. Their captain spoke to me with respect, despite knowing of our treatment of human colonies. Their crew modified their ship to accommodate my needs, even though many of them had lost friends to our weapons." The commander's light patterns showed growing impatience. "This proves only that they are naive." "Does it? Commander, they knew exactly who I was. They knew my people consider them inferior. They knew we have killed their kind and taken their worlds. They saved me anyway, not because they are naive, but because they possess something we have lost. And what is that, young fool?" Kethvar was quiet for a moment, their light pulsing with deep blue patterns of profound realization. Compassion, Commander. Pure, unconditional compassion. They saved me not because I deserved it, but because I needed it. They asked for nothing because they wanted nothing except to preserve life. The transmission fell silent. Sarah could see the other Zelhari officers on the command ship's bridge, their light patterns flickering with confusion, and what might have been the beginning of understanding. "We call them inferior," Kethvar continued, "but which is truly superior? The species that leaves beings to die in space, or the one that risks everything to save a single life? We pride ourselves on logic and perfection, but where is the logic in abandoning those who need help? Where is the perfection in a civilization that has forgotten how to show mercy?" Commander Velthara's light patterns were shifting rapidly now, cycling through emotions the translator couldn't identify. "These are dangerous thoughts, young one." "Are they? Or are they the thoughts we should have been thinking all along?" Kethvar turned to Sarah, their multifaceted eyes reflecting the bridge lights. "Captain Chen, your species has shown me something I thought was impossible. You have proven that true strength comes not from dominance, but from the courage to help others even when they cannot help you in return." Sarah felt a tightness in her throat. "Kethvar, you don't need to—" "Yes, I do." The young Zelhari faced the main screen again. "Commander, I formally request asylum among the human crew until I can return to our people as an advocate for change." The silence that followed was deafening. Commander Velthara's light patterns had stabilized into something the translator identified as deep contemplation. "This is unprecedented," the commander said finally. "So was a human ship stopping to rescue a dying Zelhari," Kethvar replied. After what felt like an eternity, Commander Velthara spoke again. "Young Kethvar will return with us when they are fully healed. But—" The commander paused, their light patterns shifting to something almost like respect. "But we will not forget what has happened here. Perhaps there are lessons to be learned from the human approach to compassion." The Zelhari warships powered down their weapons and moved to escort the Terra's promise to the edge of their territory. As they traveled, Kethvar spent their time learning about human culture, history, and philosophy. They were particularly fascinated by human concepts of charity, sacrifice, and unconditional kindness. "Your species is remarkable," Kethvar told Sarah as they prepared to transfer to the Zelhari vessels. "You have something that may be more valuable than all our technology and wisdom combined." "What's that?" "Hope. Hope that things can be better. Hope that enemies can become friends. Hope that someone who needs help will find it." Kethvar's light patterns shifted to warm golden hues. "My people have forgotten how to hope, Captain Chen. Perhaps it's time we remembered." Months later, reports began filtering through the galaxy of changes in Zelhari society. A young researcher named Kethvar had begun advocating for what they called the human principle, the idea that true advancement came not from domination, but from lifting others up. It was controversial and faced significant opposition, but it was spreading. Captain Sarah Chen smiled when she read these reports. She'd never expected their simple act of rescue to change anything beyond one life, but perhaps that was the point. In a galaxy where species abandoned each other to die in space, sometimes the most revolutionary act was simply caring about someone other than yourself. The Terra's promise continued its roots through the galaxy, and whenever they encountered someone in need, they stopped to help. Because that's what humans did. And slowly, others began to take notice.